Hi, everybody. Today is Thursday of the week beginning on July the 14th. That's the Module 2 week. Uh, the deadline for the assignment for Module 2 is 1 p.m. tomorrow, Friday. So if we look at the website, uh, I am on the student preview, so I'm using the system as a student. And what I'm showing on the screen is what any of you would see. So for module 2, I can see there are several submissions already, um, and there are a few people who have not submitted, but quite a few people already submitted. Uh, all seem to be okay, except for uh, the submission by Teresa that the attachments were not the proper attachments. I mentioned this in the previous video. So federal law prevents me from talking about performance in public about students. I'm not talking about performance here. I'm just pointing out that in the case of Teresa, for her to fulfill the assignment, she just needs to change or to submit the attachments uh, uh, as requested. So one PMG file and the .prj file. Yeah, once she does that, that will probably be correct because the commentary is correct as well. And then I can see, as you can see as well, that there are several people who have not submitted yet. So I hope most of them will submit by the deadline tomorrow. If you submit beyond after the deadline or don't submit, that will lower the grade. If you from an A, right? Again, I should say that as a master student in our program, in this program that you're in, you cannot have more than two C's. In fact, two C's put you in a situation where you get suspended. And then you have to retake one of those two courses to get the 1C from your record. At least that these are the rules as far as I know at the moment. So you cannot have two C's and graduate. So you typically want to get A's and B's in these master's level courses, no C's, right? Because once you get one, then the next one leads to a suspension, and a suspension can be problematic, particularly for students that are getting funded. Uh, the course, the tuition is being paid by an employer, for example, or financial aid. Financial aid usually requires you to get good grades in the courses for which financial aid is being provided. So you don't want to do that. In this course, if you complete the assignment as requested by the deadline, you should be fine. You should get an A in the course. Okay, um, good. So I don't see any questions under Module 1, which is the area where I'll be getting questions, or ideally, I'll be getting questions. There seem to be submissions already for Module 3, which is next week. So, one submission already by Maida. Yes, you can do submissions ahead of time. That's not a problem at all. And that seems to be a good submission, an A level submission. So you can do submissions ahead of time. What you cannot do and still get the or have be able to say that you have done enough to get an A is to submit late or not submit. So you can submit ahead of time. And sometimes students have issues that that tie them up at work, or personal issues that will tie them up for, say, the last 2 weeks of the course. So they can do the assignments for those 2 weeks ahead of time, and they'll be fine. So it's just, you cannot do late, but you can do early. One thing I wanted to mention, and this was part of one of the commentaries, uh, is related to the completeness of these models, right? So, a reasonable question is the model complete from a statistical perspective, or how complete the model is from a statistical perspective? In other words, is the model missing other variables that could explain more of the variation in the main dependent variable? And so let's answer this for this model for that's for module 2, the SAT scores project. So we have the model with results, and the main dependent variable here, which is the one you want to manipulate, you want to increase, is SAT scores. Now look at the R squared. The R squared is zero point zero 0.06, or 6%. That is the percentage of the variance explained, or the explained variance in the main dependent variable, which is SAT scores. This means that this model, these two variables that point at it, explain 6% of the variance in this variable. Roughly speaking, this means that this model explains 6% of the variation in the variable SAT. This is low. It essentially means that there are many other variables that are missing and that could explain more, or even moderate some of the relationships, and in fact, change the nature of the relationship somewhat. And this was in one of the commentaries. So there are nuances that are not captured by this model. Still, if you consider these two predictors, this one does influence SAT in a statistically significant way, which means that if you take a large number of high school districts and you do manipulate, however you do it, teacher experience, you will have an impact which is positive in SAT scores. But that does not explain much of the variance. And the other one, suspensions, does not seem to have a relationship with SAT scores. There are other things that you could do here, but we're going to see, moderation, for example. We're going to see that in a future module. But you could try to see if there is a moderating relationship between suspensions and this relationship, or the other way around. Um, but by and large, this is a rather incomplete model, even though it does tell you something. If you have to manipulate these variables to get a result, the one to manipulate is this one, not this one. And but you're not going to. It's not like if the R squared here was 1, which is very unusual. Uh, this would mean that these two variables are very strongly associated if they are not collinear, right? Uh, R squared of 1 is more commonly an indication of collinearity. So, as it turns out, you capture two variables that measure the same thing. However, if they're collected at different points in time, then they're not measuring the same thing by definition, uh, because there is that time lag. So this is sometimes what you do when you want to do prediction, right? So you're going to collect the dependent variable at one point in time and the predictors at a different point in time, prior to the main criterion or main dependent variable in the model. But this model is incomplete. For next week, for module 3, improving satisfaction with car part delivery, you will notice that the model is much more complete. So this R squared essentially means that this model explains 54% of the variance in satisfaction, which is high. This is a high number. Typically, numbers of zero point 0.2 or 20% or higher are considered to be high enough for you to have more confidence in the model. And as you can see, this model has more variables. That's typically the case. If you have more variables and they are associated with the main dependent variable, then the R squared here will increase. If the model is simpler, like the previous model, then you have this uh, lower R squared. So by definition, all models are incomplete representations of the reality, right? So a zero point 0.5 R squared or 50% R squared is considered high, but it's still incomplete, right? You have half of the variation properly accounted for by the model, the other half is not. So this uh, happens. Okay, so this is pretty much what I had for today. Uh, Thank you for watching.